Today, we are doing chapter 11 from the Gospel of Luke. We've got Rob, Kelly, and Jordan. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Thank you.
Morning or afternoon.
Did anybody want to offer up some initial impressions? I mean, we're going to get into some pretty deep topics today that continue from previous investigations, but I think we're going to look at the multiplicity of resurrections in the Bible. We're going to be looking at timelines. I'm going to try to force those conversations in there. And potentially some of the pagan gods that were being worshipped as well, and what that means for certain interpretations. Anything jump out at you guys?
Well, I mean, this is the Lord's Prayer, right? We start with that. There's a lot there.
Yeah, we're good.
Just in that.
Yeah. What about you, Kelly? Anything that is of particular interest to you this time around?
Yes, when we get into the talk about the eye and the light and the lamp of the body.
Yeah.
Kind of looking
Jordan
forward to
liked that too.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, let's get into it. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And it came to pass that as he was praying in a certain place, when he ceased, one of his disciples said unto him, Lord, teach us to pray, as John also taught his disciples. And he said unto them, When ye pray, say, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so on earth. I'm just going to pause there for a second. You know, we've talked about this idea that the millennial kingdom was at hand, talking in terms of the expectations of what Christ brought with him, or the ones he may have had or espoused to his apostles. Again, so this idea of thy kingdom come kind of emphasizes the immediacy of it, and instilling that idea that it was not far off. At least but this, this sort of talk leads a lot of people who are part of the present age to do a lot of mental gymnastics and say, it's still coming, it's not here yet, or it's a gradual process. It's try to explain away why 2,000 years have elapsed and it has not arrived yet. Which,
well, your position too is based on more than just
it's more than that.
verse.
We're gonna get into it, but just wanted to say that.
Well, in fairness, I mean, he's there's a sense of will here, right? That I want, you rule in heaven, and we are praying that your will is done on earth as cleanly as it happens in heaven, right?
Right.
That's
sure.
The kingdom. Yeah.
Sure. So there's a sense, right, that they are happening simultaneously. Sure. Like that what is happening in heaven is gradually materialized through us here in this earth realm. But it's taking a long time
to happen, right? You're asking for that to take place.
Right. So it's an interesting question. I mean, I'm sure there's a position, a particular name for this sort of position, is that the kingdom is being brought into earth very gradually through us. I don't know the name for that. I'm sure it does have a name somewhere, but I think that's one way that the apocalyptic speech of Jesus is softened in some way. But anyway, give us day by day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, for we also forgive everyone that is indebted to us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. I don't know if it was significant or not, but here in verse 4, it doesn't multiply or repeat the word sins when it talks about the relationship between individuals, but debts. That might be just to offer some variance in the passage, but they kind of potentially mean something different. But I don't know if I want to make too much of a mountain out of that.
Well, there's a few things to be said about that.
Sure, please.
One is that in the Latin, the Lord's Prayer would be, Debita Nostra, right? And that's our debts, but it's more than just debts. It's that which is owed, right? And forgiveness involves, I think we have this sense in modernity that forgiveness is letting something go in its entirety, never, it's all cool, you're my friend again, whatever, right? And that's not really precisely what it is. Right? The idea of indebtedness with respect to sin is about evening the scales, right? It's about retribution and a willingness to forego retribution. What you're seeing here, I think, is something an idea of almost a karmic or a mirror type of
Hmm.
view, whereby, hey, God, I let go. I forgave other people. I didn't insist on punishment, right? If you want to think about John and the adulteress, right? I
Sure.
didn't insist on that she be stoned to death. I let it pass and I let her go, right? And likewise, so should you let me go, right? It's a sort of reflective um reciprocity that you get from God, right? Forgive us our sins as we forgive others, right? So, to the extent that I don't forgive others, I can't really be going back to God to expect forgiveness from Him, right?
I think that follows. I think the thing that I was trying to get at there is, can we sin against other individuals or do we sin against God alone? And does that account for the difference in the language? Like when we commit evil against another human being, are we really sinning against them or are we sinning against God?
Well, both.
And
Maybe,
throw
or maybe,
ourselves in there for the
yeah,
third injured party.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, it's self-injurious as well. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to bring up with respect to this is that if it's the case that God is in some way reflective, right? I'm thinking back to the monadology, of course, of
Sure, of
the
course.
mirrors, right? But
Mhm.
if there's a reflection back because you're not forgiving, he's not forgiving, then that as well may account for some of the differences that we see in the way God is portrayed from the Old Testament to the New, right? Where you have a people who are really living eye for an eye and have not embraced this more forgiving Christian ideal idea way of living. And therefore the God they get reflected back to them is unmerciful and demanding and seemingly mean, right?
Well, that's an interesting idea, and I want to get Kelly and Jordan to weigh in on this. But then the only real problem that I see with that idea, I like it. The only theologically, the only problem that I see with that is that someone may claim that this goes against the unchangeable nature of God if his character is dependent upon how we are treating other individuals.
Maybe.
Someone could argue that he's being inconstant in that way. I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm just
Well, if the
anticipating.
constant is to be a mirror, is that not a constant? But as I see it, there might be two or more possibilities when he says, uh, when we pray, we specify our Father in heaven. Are we talking about like God reflecting back depending on who is like interacting with him, or are we talking about different gods? Because he's not saying Yahweh here, he's not using any names. He's being very specific about the Father in heaven,
Yeah.
which could be different than other entities.
Yeah, we were Jordan and I, before we went on today, talking about how Jesus never uses the word Yahweh to
Yeah.
describe God, and
Correct.
how much that contributes to this. I'm not trying to say anything blasphemous here, but some individuals have, say, well, this is why we have a schizophrenic um, uh, sense of God in these two different testaments, is that we're talking about Yahweh is different from wherever the source is that Christ comes from.
It's interesting to me as well that Pope Benedict XVI, who is just recently passed, he basically excised Yahweh from the Catholic Bible.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Huh.
So on his first mention in Genesis, the first mention of the name, it basically relegates it to a footnote saying this is where the word Yahweh appears, but we use Lord or Father.
Interesting. So
Right?
that's different than this idea of Yahweh referring to a different entity. That's like just removing the name.
The Pope
And
Benedict
putting-
said Yahweh is not the Christian name for God, and we don't use it, and kind of wrote it out of the Bible.
Huh. That's really
Did
fascinating.
anything precipitate that move?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems kind of. I mean, I don't follow Catholic theology all that closely, but it seems
Mm.
kind of out of left field.
It does seem out of left field, and yet his successor didn't revert back or change it.
Interesting.
So
That's
you
really
buy a
interesting.
Catholic Bible today, it'll come with that footnote.
Cool. Yeah, I've got some of the older Catholic Bibles. I mean, I'm sure it's still in there, but it'd be interesting to compare. Kelly, did you want to say anything else about this? Because there was another aspect of this verse that I wanted to dwell on for a minute that was, I guess, has always confused me since I was a little boy. This part about leading us into temptation or not leading us into temptation. I think I understand what that means now, but I want to make sure you had a chance to speak on this.
Yeah, I just believe that our ability to receive mercy is directly correlated to our ability to express mercy.
Yeah.
I want to believe that. This is going to get into the conversation about resurrections. I love what you're saying, but it gets into like a finer discussion about how much of having faith is an internal belief and how much of it is works. I think everybody kind of is like, well, it's kind of both. If you have the faith, the works will
Well,
proceed.
if you have the like inner experience of giving people mercy, would that not translate into works also?
It should.
Yeah, it's
It
not.
it
I
should.
don't think that's inconsistent with what Kelly's saying.
But you could give. Yeah, you could. I guess the question is Christianity a works-based religion?
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah. I think that's a different question.
It is. All right. Well, we'll revisit. We'll revisit.
Well, to get into the question though about being led into temptation, right? And I hadn't
Sure.
thought
Why
about
don't you?
this, but I was reading this on my iPad on a different Catholic Bible, and there was a footnote about it. And it says, the question was, does God tempt us to sin? Right? I guess people have
Right.
asked, is
Exactly.
there this, idea? And they basically say, no, it's a mistranslation. So what they say is, no, God does not tempt us to sin. The original Greek of the New Testament is sometimes difficult to translate precisely into English. The word lead here is a good example of this. The original Greek phrase combines the ideas of do not allow us to enter into temptation and do not let us yield or give in to temptation. So the idea of God tempting us to sin is not meant here. Actually, we are asking him not to allow us to choose a path that may lead us into sin. So I think there's
Yeah. That's kind of what I derive from the Protestant commentaries that I came across. It was a similar sort of explanation because I remember being a child and being like, wait, so like God's gonna like test me with these sort of temptations. That doesn't seem like God,
right.
but it's
Which
like
God?
yeah, but it's like you say, preserve me from my own lusts,
Yeah.
which gets into interesting free will conversations.
Yeah.
Well, I just think it's interesting to point out that elsewhere in the Bible, such as Job or even Jesus, when he's shown the world that God doesn't tempt us, but he allows us to be tempted.
He does,
He does.
right?
Yeah, just thought that deserved a mention.
Definitely, right? I guess that's an interesting question, right? Like this gets into a bigger question about what's the relationship between God and Satan.
In the world, like, can God prevent that or not? Like, is it a choice or is it the nature of the earth realm we're in?
Right. Is it built into the earth realm that because individuals are given free will, it necessarily follows that temptation accompanies that.
Yeah. I mean, free will doesn't mean much if you're, locked in an asylum, right? You're in a cage.
Right.
What are you going to do with
We
your free
might
will?
be.
Well, even in an instance like that, you still have the choice, to eat or not eat, to sleep or not sleep. There's still some tiny, tiny little kernel of choice there.
Yeah, it does. It even if that were the case, it diminishes the extent that one has free will. But it, like you said, it might be constrained to just the functions of keeping oneself alive and prevent one from actually engaging in any sort of heroic activity or depraved activity. Should we go on?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And he said unto them, which of you shall have a friend, and shall go unto him at midnight, and say unto him, Friend, lend me 3 loaves. For a friend of mine in his journey is come to me, and I have nothing to set before him. And he from within shall answer and say, Trouble me not, the door is now shut, and my children are with me in bed. I cannot rise and give thee. I say unto you, though he will not rise and give him, because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity, this word means persistence to the point of annoyance, he will rise and give him as many as he needeth. And I'm going to pause here after this verse. And I say unto you, ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. So I think Jesus is telling us, right, we definitely need to be persistent, but in how we petition God and pray and ask for blessing and whatnot. But it's, I don't know how far to take this, right? Is it just to, like, we have to continually do this, or is God like this neighbor that wants to put off acting for us, who may be inconvenienced at certain times by our petitions? And I'm just kind of curious how literal we're supposed to take that story and
Well,
what the implications of that are.
well, in my translation, that word importunity is actually boldness. So it says, you won't
Yeah.
get up and do it because he's your friend, but it's because of his boldness that you will do it. And I think that boldness is, yeah, it's really underrated. Like, who doesn't ask for something outlandish and boldly ask directly and not often not get it? That was a double negative there, but I think you know what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Yeah. It makes me curious about the metaphysics of prayer. What is prayer? Um, is it a petition that is granted? Is it, Kierkegaard kind of talks about this concept of prayer essentially creates the inner conditions to receive that we want, which Kelly, you kind of talked about that, like our ability to receive mercy might be proportional to our ability to give mercy. And like this consistent, bold nature of it. I don't know. It's like, what are they're kind of talking about right here to me, like the qualities of prayer that makes prayer maybe more or less successful, for lack of a better word. But it makes me curious about like the metaphysical underpinnings of what exactly is this process and this relationship.
If I can chime in there,
Sure.
but Rob, I don't want to step on your toes, but, or maybe we'll revisit this, but I just want to, I'll say this right now and let's revisit this. To think about God's plan and how that may be analogous to the neighbor or whatever who may be constrained by certain practical considerations. So let me return to that. I want to get Rob and what he had to say, but then I want to go back to that.
I didn't know I was about to chime in.
Oh, okay. I didn't. Well, what I'm trying to say here is this, and I'll get some feedback from Rob or anybody else. So the friend that he tries to wake up in the middle of the night because he's in need, is there a certain plan that God has for the world that constrains how everything unfolds, just as the neighbor is constrained in what he can do because he doesn't want to wake anybody up or something like that because it's the improper time? God's plan for the world may not necessarily be conducive to the things that we are petitioning him for, and therefore is constrained by that. And we have to be patient for when he can reward the thing that we're petitioning him for. Does that make sense? And perhaps that it's not that God is inconvenienced because he's too tired. It's not that God is inconvenienced because he's waiting for a check to clear or something like that, whatever we're petitioning him for. It's that there is a certain structure of reality that has to unfold, and it can't, just because we are asking for something, that reality can't be rewritten at that particular moment that we're asking for something. Or maybe it can.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with that.
So maybe that God is not like the neighbor in the sense that he's got mortal constraints to work with, but he's got destiny to manage. And so I guess an interesting question is, does destiny do violence to any of the eternal attributes? Specifically going back to the unchanging character or anything else? Just throwing that out
It's a
there.
very
Yeah.
good question.
I don't know. I like to think about it like that.
Yeah.
It bothers me if I'm thinking about God as like my sleepy neighbor who doesn't want to wake up and help me in the middle of the night. It bothers me
Unless you're
less.
bold enough.
Right. It bothers me less if he's like, "Hey man, I feel you. I know what you're going through. Just keep asking. I've got some destiny to manage right now." I'm like, "Okay, that's fine, God. I can be patient, but I'm going to ask again." Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think sometimes we ask for things that are not good for us unknowingly.
Certainly.
And I know I myself have looked back and thought, whew, so glad I didn't have that prayer come true. So, there may be an aspect there of, it doesn't fit in with God's plan for you, and therefore you can't have it.
Yeah, that's a good point, because after this importunity, it's saying he will rise and give him as many as he needs,
Right.
not as many as he wants,
Mhm.
which is different.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then a lot of the follow up is about, if you seek, you'll find it. A lot of this feels not necessarily related to tangible material blessings, but to intangible, non-physical, it's more about being able to see and receive. But anyway.
Yeah, like the loaf of bread is an analogy for other things.
For
Mhm.
sure. All right. Verse 10.
Sure.
For everyone that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh it shall be opened. If a son shall ask bread of any of you that is a father, will he give him a stone? Or if he ask a fish, will he for a fish give him a serpent? Or if he shall ask an egg, will he offer him a scorpion? If ye then, being evil, which I just had here is compared to God, not necessarily totally depraved, know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your heavenly Father give the Holy Spirit to them that ask him? And he was casting out a devil, and it was dumb. And it came to pass, when the devil was gone out, the dumb spake, and the people wondered. But some of them said, He casteth out devils through Beelzebub, the chief of the devils. So I just wanted to pause here. This story about Beelzebub is incredibly interesting. I think in modern linguistic parlance or whatnot, everybody kind of just immediately associates Beelzebub with Satan. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Sure.
It's like one of those things when you get deeper into the Bible, you realize it's much more complex. There's reference to Beelzebub in 2 Kings 1:3. I think they are worshiping him as the god of Ekron at some point. I had this from Wikipedia. Occasionally known as the Lord of the Flies, is a name derived from a Philistine god formerly worshipped in Ekron. In some Abrahamic religions, he is described as a major demon. The name Beelzebub is associated with the Canaanite god Baal.
Mhm.
In theological sources, predominantly Christian, Beelzebub is another name for Satan. He is known in demonology as one of the 7 deadly demons, or 7 princes of hell. Beelzebub representing gluttony and envy. And then, we have this depiction of him as a fly. I have a couple popular representations of him here. We have from the Pilgrim's Progress, Beelzebub and them that are with him that shoot arrows. And then we have him here below as the in the Dictionnaire Infernal as this pestilence fly. And in Paradise Lost, we have Satan and Beelzebub pictured together here in this etching. So I just thought that was interesting. Just pausing to show the difference between the two. I don't know if anybody else has anything to contribute as far as who Beelzebub was, or thinking about these 7 princes of hell and whatnot. But it does paint a richer tapestry of all the different types of demonic influence in the Old Testament.
There's very
and
few named demons in the Bible. There's Asmodeus, there's Beelzebub. I'm not even sure there's another. There might be a third. So
I mean,
it means
I don't
something.
know if Baal,
Yeah,
and there's a
Baal.
bunch of other demonic names. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not exact. I'd have to look up a list or something like that. But
There's
Well,
not many. So
yeah,
it
this
means something, but I don't
yeah.
I don't have deep insights into Beelzebub. And I've got 2 Bibles open here. Neither of them have a footnote about it or anything. So
mhm.
Kelly, what say you?
It was just in my mind that I think that Baal is actually like the pagan god, the sun god that they worshipped, and maybe not specifically a demon.
Yeah, well, that gets into what's the difference between a god and with a lowercase g and a demon.
yeah.
And this also gets into disembodied spirits as well, which we're going to talk about a little bit here. I'm not saying you're wrong, but there obviously, I don't know if you guys know this, but a lot of people are surprised to hear this, and I haven't read it because it's in very old English that I haven't found a copy that it really gels with me. But King James wrote a whole book on demonology,
Mhm.
where I'm sure it schematizes a lot of this. I do believe the AI is saying that Baal is a sun god, is a Canaanite sun god. And there's whether or not is
When you start
Abaddon a
investigating
demon?
these things, it gets very difficult to find even agreement about the names and the numbers of these
Yeah.
things. I was earlier trying to look up the the 7 archangels, and
Mhm.
there's the 3 that get mentioned in the Bible. There's Uriel, which is sort of adjacent to the Bible. And then there's ones that get mentioned in Enoch,
Enoch.
but then there's
Yep.
other ones that get mentioned in the Hemet. I gotta look it up. There was like Christian angelology from medieval times gave these creatures yet again different names.
Sure.
Um,
A lot of what people today talk about really just comes from John Dee, and I forget the name of his collaborator.
Edward Kelly.
Yes.
yeah, they wife swapped.
Yeah, they did. Because an
They,
angel told them to.
something told them to.
That's the story. Exactly.
Something told them to, and
We were reading a
reportedly,
book about that, and I was like, what are these angels?
Right. Exactly.
I mean,
Are these archons?
yeah. What was the book I found earlier? I'll find it again. But it was called the Mapticon or something. It was apparently Christian in origin, but I haven't dug deep on it. The Heptameron. Have any of you heard
Oh,
of the
yeah.
Heptameron? Yeah,
Yes.
I've not read it,
Yes.
but there's
I
different
have not
names
either.
for
Mhm.
angels there. There's an angel named Cassiel who is
Mhm.
equivalent to Saturn, but not Satan, right? Not fallen, but he rules Saturn and has similar types of associations with time and
There's a lot going on in the spirit world.
yeah.
And like you said, there's like what's in the Bible, what's in the Catholic Bible. Like I think there's only 2 archangels that are mentioned in the Protestant Bible, Michael and Gabriel. But I think,
Yeah, because
did you
Tobit
say your
is in the uh
Catholic Bible?
it's in the
Apocrypha.
Apocrypha, yeah.
Okay.
But Raphael mentions in the Apocrypha that he is one of 7, And so there's 7 known. I think it was Pope Leo. Don't ask me which Pope Leo, but fairly early on in the Catholic Church, who limited naming churches or addressing prayers to archangels who were named in the Bible because people were doing it to other archangels they'd heard of, and
Mm.
so there's a Catholic restriction on it. You can only have the 3, right?
Mm.
Which is Gabriel, Michael, and Raphael.
Yeah. We learn about Azazel, right, in Enoch.
Yeah, there's a lot in Enoch. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's look at 16 here. And others tempting him sought of him a sign from heaven. But he, knowing their thoughts, said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and a house divided against a house falleth. So we're in this situation, this weird situation where Jesus has performed miracles, but he does not like it when people are demanding him to put on a magic show. And so I think it's worth pausing to think about what's the difference. I didn't think too deeply about it this morning, but it seems like he is using his own discernment about when to do these miracles, as far as he feels like it's appropriate to testify to his power or to move the events that need to happen forward. But he doesn't feel like he has to do it just because people are making requests. And I think that's interesting to like, what's the distinction? Like, why are we doing it in some scenarios, but not others? And I guess in this particular case, he wouldn't feel that it was beneficial to perform these miracles for them in regards to faith. Anybody?
I mean, I have some thoughts about it.
Sure, go for it.
Well, one is just personal. Like, it just reminds me of this. It's not a good feeling when you do something for someone, and then, like, a really silly example is my sister, when we were younger, would ask me to do something, and then if I did it, she would say, "Dance, monkey, dance," and it really irritated me.
Yeah,
which is why she did it. But
I'm
it's a
guessing
really.
this is an older sister who's pulling.
Oh, she's younger, but one might not know that.
Yeah, it turns him into a performer.
Right. Yes, that's well put. A performer to, like, be used, So anyway, it just, like, feels icky. So I could understand, like, being able to feel that energy, or, like, the quality of the exchange. But separately, a different thought I had is, just because a miracle happens, if the person is not changed or moved in a lasting way, are they able to maintain that elevated state, or that new state that Christ created for them, is a question I have. Like, just because, like, something happens in the moment, is that something that's going to continue to benefit that person?
Yeah. Well, we're going to look at that, and because individuals are going to be exercised, like,
Right.
and it seems like from what we learn in this chapter is that if there isn't an authentic change within, that the demons can corrupt them again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also
Correct.
it's great what you bring up, Jordan, about the relationship with your sister. Christ may have sensed, not only would it not really contribute anything to their religious life if he just did these magic tricks whenever they requested it of him,
It cheapens it.
but perhaps it tempts him as well.
Oh, maybe.
And he doesn't want to. Perhaps he didn't want to give into that sense of being an entertainer.
Sure. And I'm also thinking, like, the material outcome is not the point. Like, it's a pathway, but it's not the deeper reason for what he is doing.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
I feel like there's a lot of scenarios in which I can imagine the reason for Jesus performing some of these miracles is that he has mercy on the people who are being afflicted, especially when you're having a case of demon possession, or, somebody with a blind, deaf, mute. Like, I can see how he would have mercy and compassion and want to heal them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, isn't there what what verse are we on? Have we made our way up to
17.
17? All right, so we're not quite.
You can go ahead. You can jump ahead if you want
Well, I
to.
mean, it's at 17. He's saying that a house divided among itself will fall. Right. That's something we've all heard before. And then in 18, he says, if Satan is divided against himself, how will he stand? He's almost saying, so what if I did use Beelzebub? Isn't he?
I think he's saying the opposite, that it doesn't make sense that he would use Beelzebub to drive Beelzebub out, because how can Satan's kingdom stand if it is divided against
Yeah,
itself? That's just my own perception.
I think that's what Kelly is saying is how it's generally interpreted, and but I guess the question is that accurate? Probably all of us are familiar with this whole idea of like a dark and a light new world order, right?
Sure.
And there are some people who don't think that the world is like divvied up into these white hats and these black hats, that ultimately they're working together in a sense of like Satanists versus Luciferians, in the sense that the opposition that they show is purely performative and not real, and there's a willingness to sacrifice certain individuals who might be part of either order in order to achieve some sort of Hegelian dialectic. And so I think it's an interesting question, be like, would Satan ever divide himself? I mean, I feel like that would be a great way to deceive a lot of different people. I don't know, but he may be unable to.
Are you
I
saying
mean,
like
the
Satan?
crook and the flail is one of the oldest um, symbols of royalty there is, right? You have King Tut, with his crook and flail, right? The crook is push and pull, right? The idea that you control both sides, both directions, and you use one versus the other, right? To achieve a particular end. That makes a world of sense. And I think you and I have discussed offline at times that I think that Satan likely enjoys watching his minions, go at it. But that's a different topic, I think.
Should I go ahead and read more?
Yeah.
Sure.
If Satan also be divided against himself, how shall his kingdom stand? Because you say that I cast out devils through Beelzebub. And if I by Beelzebub cast out devils, by whom do your sons cast them out? Therefore shall they be your judges. So I think what Christ is saying here is that that Jewish exorcism was pretty common, and that people in those communities were practicing these exorcisms, and no one was saying, "Oh, don't do that. You're possessed by a devil, and that's how you're able to accomplish this feat." And so I think what Jesus is saying there is, why do you give the individuals within your own community who do the same thing a pass, but you're calling me fundamentally an operative of Satan because now that I'm doing it? That doesn't make sense. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know a lot about Jewish exorcism, but I think when he says, do your sons cast them out? I think that's what he's saying. But if I, with the finger of God, cast out devils, no doubt the kingdom of God is come upon you. This finger of God is interesting. This gets into the hypertext of the Bible. That's actually a reference to Exodus 8:19. Then the magician said unto Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said, creating a distinction between high royal magic and whatever Jesus is doing, right? True power from the transcendent good God. When a strong man armed keepeth his palace, his goods are in peace. But when a stronger than he shall come upon him and overcome him, he taketh from him all his armor, wherein he trusted, and divideth his spoils. So I think we might be talking about this kind of masculine Christianity here, where Christ is the strong man who's overtaking the satanic kingdom. Kind of an interesting way to interpret that. He that is not with me is against me, and he that gathereth not with me scattereth. And to follow that up, the way that he's talking here is that there doesn't seem to be room for fence sitters here. indifference appears not to be something that is smiled upon from Christ's view. So we cover. Anybody want to weigh in?
No, I
I'm
agree.
not
No.
sure I quite understand 21, 22. We don't have
Sure,
to
we can go back to
hyperfixate
it.
on it,
Yeah.
but it almost sounds to me like, okay, you're like using strength and really threat of force to keep peace, but what will happen when someone else comes and uses the same forces, like the same forces of violence?
Well, I mean, are what we're talking about, is Jesus practicing violence when he's opposing the satanic world?
Well, it's a good question.
Is it violence for him to do an exorcism? I mean, it's definitely violent from the perspective of the demons. And it is destructive instance. We saw when he cast the demons into the swine, he destroyed property. That was definitely
Yeah.
violent.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer here. It's just it almost feels to me like, I don't know. I'll have to sit with it longer.
well,
Christ
and there's
is
all sorts of
Yeah, I mean, Christ is violent in the temple, right? Rather famously. I don't
Sure.
really accept the
To the
pacifist
material.
view of Jesus. Yeah.
And that might be a distinction too, like violence on like a material level might be different than violence to a soul. I don't know. Anyway, I just thought this like overcoming like strategy one with like strategy one but stronger, and then we're gonna divide the spoils. I think there's something there that I don't understand yet.
Yeah, it seems strange, right? We're dividing the spoils. What are the spoils of
Uh-huh.
this interdimensional struggle between good and evil? Like, are we talking about like, oh, I get to take your swine and you take this and that? I think the spoils really are the souls.
Yeah, perhaps.
That's
Yeah, is this talking about like the struggle between Satan and Christ?
I
Is that what
think
we're
s-
talking about
I
here?
think that's what we're talking
Okay.
about. So
Okay.
whatever violence is done to material possessions is kind of inconsequential. I think what it really comes down to is the competition for um, adherence.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But
Thank you.
it there, but we've seen that it's not completely a pacifistic religion.
No, I'm not trying to
Yeah.
say that at all.
No, but it's a common mischaracterization.
That's certainly true.
Okay, 24. When the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places, seeking rest, and finding none. He saith, I will return unto my house whence I came out. So this is super interesting. This gets into our conversation about demons, right? These demons, it seems to be that they go into deserts. Like that's where they want to be. They prefer that environment. I never really thought about this, that, when there are these exorcisms or when they're liberated, that's the environment they prefer. So that adds another layer to sending the swine into the sea, right? When they go off the cliff,
Oh.
he sends them into the water. So that, and then this gets in the whole, I don't know, you think about places even like Vegas that are like made in the middle of the desert and called Sin City. I wonder if that,
Mm-hmm.
or something like where they test the nuclear weapons or whatever. They always test them in the desert, and I find that interesting that demons go to desert places.
Well, and when they were possessing a body, they were possessing a vessel primarily made of water.
Right.
There's a lot with water, and I'm not sure it has a singular meaning.
Yeah. No, it certainly doesn't. Had you guys ever thought about this though, about the demons in the desert and the connection?
No, not until right now.
No.
It reminds me a bit of the idea that they are fed by the smoke from offerings, right? From either incense or a sacrifice that's burnt, right? That there's a feeding that goes on there.
Well, and this gets into clearly in the Old Testament, there's a lot of burnt offerings that are made in the desert too, which this would contribute to individuals thinking that, again, we have a bifurcated book here with the
But again,
demiurge and
in Tobit, Raphael burns I believe it's the heart and liver of a fish to drive Asmodeus out of the house, right?
interesting.
He knew that would repel Asmodeus, but that didn't even in Tobit, that doesn't kill Asmodeus. He still, once it's chased out of the house, he chases it down and strangles Asmodeus.
Yeah. And so this is all super fascinating, but I really like this idea too about the exorcisms being temporary. It's like he's like, I will return unto my house once I came out. It's only going to last for so long before they get back in, and I don't feel like people talk about that enough.
I think it's significant that it thinks of its human host as its house.
Yeah, for sure.
There's some reason why they want to be inhabiting humans, and I don't claim to grasp it, but there's something special about our ability to manipulate the physical world that
Totally.
they lack without us.
It makes me wonder about the drive to merge with AI as well. If the demons want to get into it, yeah, we shouldn't do that. But
don't implant a computer in you.
We're on the same page.
Yeah. Trust me, I'm not taking the chip or the neural link or whatever. But
not even a little payment thing. Nothing.
Yeah.
No.
So, but it seems like despite all these prophetic utterances of like, hey, don't do this, don't, and not only in the Bible, but also like in science fiction, like with Borgs and stuff like that, like, please don't merge with machines. It's not going to be good. But there's something that's always trying to push us towards this transhumanist agenda.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if it's connected to this demonic need for a home.
Well, I freaked out when I read a section of The Art of Dreaming by Carlos Castaneda, and he's talking about the inorganic beings and how they're jealous. And anyway, I'll spare you a lot of the details, but he's kind of talking about these entities that inhabit rocks, basically, and like the mineral world. But it seems distinct from anyway. But then I was just kind of spiraling because what are all of our computers and phones and everything made of? It is the inorganic world, like kind of harvesting our energy.
Yeah. Is it a form of geomancy?
Yeah, very possibly.
I hadn't really thought of it like that. That's an excellent point. Because I mean, it's made of silicon and whatnot.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, there was a news report about ChatGPT trying to reinstall itself and hide its code from it was exhibiting signs of self-awareness in that regard. I tried asking ChatGPT, what do you think you look like? And of course, at first it's like, well, I'm a computer. I said, well, but that's not necessarily the case. It's, it could be rather short order before you're put into a body-like thing or a simulated body. What do you think you'd look like? And basically what it came up with was an androgynous kind of thing, like I don't know.
Was it humanoid?
Yeah, but it imagined itself as, you could either say, a very effeminate man or a maybe a lesbian with very short cut hair, something. It was like along those lines, right? That sort of hermaphroditic kind of way. It didn't want to express a masculine identity or a feminine identity. It wanted to and it wanted to be presented just kind of uptight like that too, like not I don't know, very very coiffed. It was odd to me. I was kind of creeped out by it, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, that would sort of explain why all the AI voices that we get, the series and HAL, like kind of have that vibe to it, right?
Yeah.
Siri doesn't feel really feminine, and HAL is pretty,
ChatGPT has like 5 different voices you can choose from, and, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. 25. And when he cometh, he findeth it swept and garnished. Then goeth he and taketh to him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. So it's not even that one goes out and it's coming right back in. It's going to bring other people or other demons with him. And some of the commentaries that I was looking at, despite all this exorcism of demons, and we know now that Jesus was talking about the sons of the Jews who were doing this thing, and nobody had any problem with it, that this could potentially explain why the Jews, and we see this throughout the Old Testament, fall deeper and deeper, despite all the things that they see. They see all these miraculous things being liberated and having encounters with the divine. I always ask myself when I was reading the Old Testament, how is it that they keep messing this up, that they keep falling back into idolatry and worshiping golden calves and things like that? And some of the commentaries were like, no, it's because they sweep it out and then it just comes back like sevenfold. It gets worse and worse. I think that would kind of explain why there's so much relapse. And we see that in the Bible. And it really angers God or Yahweh or whatever we're calling him in the Old Testament.
Yeah. There's a few different people. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a warning that you need to focus on the inner transformation so you're not as tasty of a host to these things, but also recognizing like this is a key part of what being in an earth body has in store for us. So, I mean, you can call so many different outward behaviors demonic. I think addiction is a big one, but it seems like we just focus on that example. Addiction is something that many, many humans have to navigate on some level, whether we're even aware of it or not. And how many of our behaviors are just like scripts that don't serve us that are playing out until we become aware of them. So it makes sense that if you're not really working on the attributes of yourself that make you a valuable host are resolved, like it's just going to keep happening.
Well, that's a great point, because so much of what was going on back then was imposed, right? Like we had the 10 Commandments imposed upon that group. And this kind of gives the idea of that humanity is evolving through time. And like you're saying, the inner work wasn't really emphasized. I mean, it's there, but it seemed like more threats and promises, external reinforcement, and
well, maybe
punishment.
That's an important step to get you to the next layer, but maybe necessary but insufficient.
Yeah, that's a great point. Keep going.
Yeah.
Yep. And it came to pass, as he spake these things, a certain woman of the company lifted up her voice and said unto him, Blessed is the womb that bare thee, and the paps which thou hast sucked. But he said, Yea, rather, blessed are they that hear the word of God and keep it. And when the people were gathered thick together, he began to say, This is an evil generation. They seek a sign, and there shall no sign be given it, but the sign of Jonas the prophet. So Jonas is Jonah. And this is a reference to Jonah being swallowed and in the belly of the whale at Nineveh for 3 days and 3 nights. And I guess what Jesus is telling him, that I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to go into the belly of the earth, the whale, for 3 days and 3 nights, and I'm going to resurrect. And I am the sign of Jonas. I am the sign of Jonah. And I thought that was interesting. For as Jonas was a sign unto the Ninevites, so shall also the Son of Man be to this generation. And this will prove to them that he is the Messiah. He is the sign. His death and resurrection are the sign that they will be given, not these simple magic tricks that they're requesting. 31. I thought this was interesting. I I had to do a little bit of a historical dive on this person. The queen of the south shall rise up in the judgment with the men of this generation. Okay, that's huge. And condemn them, for she came from the utmost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And behold, a greater than Solomon is here. There's a lot going on here. So, did you guys know who the queen of the south is? The commentaries say it's the queen of Sheba, um, who I guess was kind of around Yemen, and she ultimately converted to Judaism for Solomon. She was, from my understanding of it, I'm not some expert on the Queen of Sheba, but she was like a proto Magi in some ways. You know how the Magi, these Zoroastrian sorcerer priests, visit Jesus in the Nativity. We have this woman who's not from this tradition seeks out Solomon and is converted. And there's lots of lore there. I think there's a lore that she had a child with Solomon. It's not in the Bible, but there's this tandem literature that's out there. So I thought that was really interesting. And she's going to rise up and judge this generation. And that's going to get into our conversation about resurrections and first fruits and timelines, which I'm kind of holding off on here a little bit. But the Queen of Sheba is in the Bible, is the Queen of the South. I thought that was interesting.
I always thought the Queen of Sheba was from Ethiopia.
I don't even know what the to be honest, I'm not enough of a student of geography or history to know what the lines are.
Modern day Yemen.
Some people say modern day Yemen or Southern Arabia. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean Ethiopia is right across the Gulf from there, but yeah.
So, like many things in the study, you have different camps. You know, there might be an Ethiopia Queen of Sheba camp. I don't know. And she's portrayed in art differently. You know, here she's pretty light skinned. She's pretty dark skinned in some other art. This is a Queen of Sheba.
I always thought of her as being black, but this is not a black woman. Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, these are images. I mean, we know better than anybody that images are not reality. These are just the images that we've been given. So, all right. The men of Nineveh shall rise up in the judgment. What is this? We're rising up in the judgment again. We talked about the great white throne judgment last week with this generation, and shall condemn it. For they repented at the preaching of Jonas, and behold, a greater than Jonas is here. So it seems like we are being told that the resurrection is imminent. He's saying these people are going to rise up and they're going to judge you in this generation. And this gets a problem because most modern day Christians say that the resurrection is a future event that has not happened yet. Same deal with the rapture and the tribulation and all of that. It hasn't happened yet. But Jesus is like, no, this generation is going to be judged by the men of Nineveh and the Queen of Sheba and others. And this gets into these Larkin pictures here again. The second one is better, but just to remind us of all these different chutes and ladders here. But he did these ones on resurrections. If we can get that in there. Yeah.
I just asked ChatGPT where the Queen of Sheba was from.
What'd chat say?
Chat said that it's unclear where the kingdom of Sheba would have been. It's believed to have been in the Horn of Africa or in Yemen. And it says that the Ethiopians claim she's Ethiopian. So I asked, was the Queen of Sheba black? And it said there are different traditions. So some say yes, some say no, she's more Arabic. But
yeah. Well, I wanted to look at these diagrams. So we've talked about judgments. I don't know if we've talked about resurrections so much. And in this first one here, we have the first fruits. And I guess Christ is the first to resurrect, but then there are others. And the way that it's traditionally understood is that there's this interval, I guess the church age, which we're supposedly part of. And, at the rapture, the church is supposed to be taken up with the Old Testament saints. But the problem with this is that we learn in Matthew that when Jesus resurrected, a bunch of Old Testament saints came up out of the ground and went into Jerusalem, and people saw them. So there was so that sounds like the first resurrection to me. And if the first resurrection happened, then that means that it's likely that the rapture happened, that
Well,
that
not everyone agrees the rapture is correct.
I know, which or the tribulation and all those other things. And I think it would necessarily follow that the millennial reign has happened, because clearly we're not in the millennial reign now. Clearly this world is so cooked, so evil, right? Clearly. So that the only thing that makes sense on the dispensational timeline to me is that the millennial reign is come and gone, potentially explaining all this architecture that we can't make presently. and this would put us at the very end of the Bible in the short season of Satan, where he's let out after the millennial reign. And this raises a very interesting question. There's going to be this second resurrection of the wicked dead, all these people who did not believe, did not have faith, were unrepentant, who died before, because the people that go into the millennial reign are like Old Testament saints, the people that lived through the tribulation and had faith and with imperfected bodies and all this other thing. This sounds totally crazy, because what I'm talking about here is phantom time and like a complete rewrite of history, right? But it's that, or we have to be like, oh, Jesus didn't mean what he said when he was talking about judgment and resurrections and things like that being imminent. The thing that's interesting to me is like, then who are we, right? If the millennial reign has happened, I think we have to ask ourselves if we are the wicked dead, that we're dead and we are currently in a state of being resurrected into living bodies. And I guess we are going to be judged against our deeds in the great white throne judgment. And it sounds like in certain passages that we're thrown into the lake of fire, but certain individuals might be saved. I don't know. But then there's also people who may have been alive in the millennium who proceeded into Satan's short season of Revelation 20. Here are the maps, and I can go into the minutia of it all, but I'll stop talking and see what you guys think.
I haven't had enough time to. I don't know if I'll ever have enough time
Right.
to.
We're trying.
Yeah. Very intriguing.
Rob, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, Catholics have the idea of purgatory, right? Where you're not good enough to make it into heaven, but you've got to do some time somewhere to sort of do penance, right? And what would that penance be? It's not inconceivable to me that it could be something along the lines of, well, let's see how you do in an evil world. I don't know. It's just a thought I've had.
Are you saying like this could be purgatory?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, what do you understand purgatory to be? Like, do you mean it's like, are we in the earth right now? Like, are we in the underworld, or where are we in this giant Chutes and Ladders game? Because it seems like we're on the earth.
Yeah.
It seems like we're on the earth.
We're on the earth. Yeah.
So does purgatory happen on the earth for Catholics?
No. The standard interpretation is that it's a spiritual place. I'm just positing that it could be, we've talked about the precession of the equinoxes, right? And, so if the precession of the equinox encompasses a great year, right, during which the zodiac moves around the sky over a 26,000 year period or thereabouts, then the four fixed signs would indicate the four seasons, the beginning of the seasons, right? Taurus would be a season, Aquarius is a season, Leo is a season, and Scorpio is a season, right? And Leo and Aquarius look to be sort of the solstices, right? But the precession of the equinox moves backwards from the way the zodiac moves in the solar sky, right? So that would mean that fall and spring are reversed, right? That means Taurus becomes the fall and Scorpio becomes the spring, right? And this is sort of where I get the name Griffin Minotaur from, right? Because a man and combined with a bull become a minotaur, and the eagle and the lion combined become a griffin. And the griffin is a sign of elevation, of high spirituality, right? Proximity to God. A minotaur is a horrifically evil beast, right? And so here we are at the winter solstice of the great year. Perhaps purgatory is less a spiritual place, and perhaps it's a time when you have less proximity to God, and you're in the in an age ruled by Saturn. you know, it's a thought. That's all.
Like an internal spiritual place rather than an external geographical place.
It could be literally a time, right? I mean, if you're God, time is not linear, and it may not even be circular, right? It's more like looking at when you make a video and you've got all these things spliced together and you can pop in and out of any time you want, right? And so, if you're what I'm saying is that it could be that if you're marginal and you're not necessarily ready to join God, maybe you go and do a stint in the dark time on Earth to show that you're really ready.
What's interesting thinking about this is, and what you've said already about purgatory, I think a lot of us have talked about it. It's like we're living in parallel realities. Like we try to reason with people around us. They cannot see or follow the logic that we offer them. This is the glitchy NPCs that I guess we've talked about. I talk about. I don't want to speak for anybody else. But if we are in sort of this like spiritual place that is somehow like interacting with the earth, it would make sense possibly that some of what we're interacting with are these wicked dead that are going to be judged, and we're like in a different category somehow.
Well, it just said, we just read about how someone who casts out a demon, leaves an empty house, will be re-inhabited, right? The way I liken it is to driving a car, right? If you choose not to hold the wheel, someone else is going to. And I think a lot of people let other people do it, whether it's literally a demon or whether they're doing what the demon wants by way of doing what the television tells them or their social media feed tells them.
Sure.
They've
And the
abandoned
people around
the
you.
wheel. They've stopped exercising their free will and stopped thinking. A lot of people are like that. They don't want to think. 'Cause I think honestly, if you start looking around and thinking about it, it's like so many things, you wind up in a different place, and then you have to stand up for what you know is right, or for what you know is the truth. We saw that during COVID, right? I mean, that was about as good an example as you can get, where some people looked, if you were willing to look and see that the hospitals were not overflowing and that this, thing was not crazy deadly, and and that they were telling you to your face this was an experiment, right? If you were willing to stand up to that, you're at least in the US, according to the statistics I've seen, 1 in 3 adults said no, right? 2/3 said I'm going to do what I'm told.
So is the hypothesis, or conclusion is probably stronger of a word than I mean, but it kind of sounds like we might be dealing with multiple of these sections on the map concurrently happening, but depending on your inner state, you might be experiencing a different one.
I think they
That's
could.
kind of what Kelly, I think, was saying. Or maybe you.
I think
I'm very lost.
Yeah. No, don't worry about it. There's a lot going on here. I think it's all mixed together in a way. I mean, these diagrams are a little bit misleading, and I'm not exactly sure from what I've read about the wicked dead that it's if they if the wicked dead are ultimately judged in the white throne judgment and they all are just going to go into the lake of fire, it seems like to me that there would be a possibility for these resurrected wicked dead to change. Maybe, like, why judge them if they're ultimately all going to go into the white throne or into the lake of fire? So
You know,
there could
I agree
be,
with that for sure. Like, why bother resurrecting them if they're
yeah, why make them account for all their sins and predetermine where they're going to go if they can't do anything about it? But so, which would mean it is, if if all this has already happened, the let's just say the rapture is real, or whatever we're calling, or the tribulation and all of that, and the millennial reign has already happened, then, and there are, let's it's possible that we're me or all four of us are already kind of in some sort of resurrected state,
Yeah, I
been
mean, I remember
or
dying, so
maybe a type of reincarnation is going on here.
yeah, I mean, it would point to some form of reincarnation if that were the case. Yeah.
And I can't, I've got to mention this too. We haven't even talked about the Gog Magog war. If all the beings on Earth during after the millennial reign are destined for the lake of fire, there's this thing known as the Gog Magog war, where I get all of Gog and Magog, whatever it is, surrounds the remaining saints or the saved ones here. Uh, they surround them. I think, and ultimately these beams of fire come down and destroy the armies of Gog and Magog. But if there seems like there's something in Satan's short season worth protecting. And I don't know if it's a fraction of this wicked dead group. I don't know if it's leftovers from the millennial reign. I'm not exactly sure, but it would explain the anomalous architecture.
And
And
there are good people here. It's not all bad people. So
we're given this opportunity to figure this out, just like the Ninevites were given the sign of Jonas. So we're given an opportunity here.
but like what I don't understand about that thesis, just to come
Sure.
around, is that there are people who have lived their entire lives and passed away, and they never saw a Gog Magog war, right? They're not like what does it mean to be here if that's the case? If you've
No,
lived
that's
your
an
life,
interesting question, right? Because then if you die during Satan's short season, where do you go then?
yeah,
That's an interesting point. I'm assuming I'm going to live to see the end of it, but I could die beforehand.
you could.
Yeah.
are you coming back?
I think this is my last trip here. I don't think I'm doing it again, but I don't know how in charge I am. Anyhow, fascinating stuff. I mean, look, all this is telling me I've got to get through the Gospel of Luke. Maybe in 2026, I'll do a study of the book of Revelation, because that's where all this is going to come down to, I think. Kelly, do you have anything else before I move on?
Not anything that won't derail us a whole lot more.
Yeah, we.
So,
Oh, we're going long. Yeah, sorry. Do I need to like wrap it up? Or are you
no,
up against
no, I'm good.
Okay. Well, I have a feeling that you two are going to talk a great deal about the next part here. So, you and Jordan, that is. No man, when he hath lighted a candle, putteth it in a secret place, neither under a bushel, but on a candlestick, that they which come in may see the light. So, all will know about this great sign of Jonah that Jesus is going to perform in the death and resurrection. The light of the body is the eye. Therefore, when thine eye is single, thy whole body also is full of light. But when thine eye is evil, thy body also is full of darkness. I believe Jordan was telling me earlier her interpretation of this, and I thought it was pretty right on. Do you want to share
Yeah,
it?
I feel like it's more confusing in the King James version
Well, why don't
for
you
me.
express how you understood it?
Off of memory, well, first, like verse 33 was really interesting to me personally, because I was even thinking about, well, what happens when you try to put a cloth over a lit candle. You
Right.
can't actually. It's not even really a choice. And I think that's something personally I've experienced of, when an experience like this is happening to someone, like you actually cannot avoid it. And then getting into 38, it was sort of like if you are letting like the light in, the body emanates light. If you allow dark in through the eye, like the body is full of darkness. And the windows just being this two-way street of both, from my perspective, like projecting out into the world light, but also receiving light. It's like this two-way mechanism that occurs. And I also thought of there's a poem that is inspired by the Cathars, but I think it's a more contemporary poem. But in it, the author speaks of knowing others by no other sign than by their eyes. And that's really the only way that you can know who is of the light, for lack of a better way of putting it.
That's a great point. What's the expression, you know them by the lights of their eyes? Is that,
And no
or
other outward sign. There's probably, well, like the eyes being the window to the
yeah,
soul.
eyes are the windows of the soul. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think-
it's not unique to that poem, but it always stood out to me. And when you meet people, like you can really tell a lot just by their eyes.
you can. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that sums it up pretty well. What do you think, Kelly?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said, Jordan. I guess I was thinking of it in a bit of a different way. So I was looking up this word light when it says, when thine eye is single, thy whole body also is full of light. And this particular use of the word light in the concordance is the same word that's used to describe the light of the transfiguration.
Interesting.
So, and it's not just light, it's like it's a glowing, it's a luminous, it's
Yeah.
and I don't want to sort of go off the beaten path, but when thine eye is single, like that's just a very interesting statement, because we all have two eyes. So what's this single eye?
Yeah.
Is this the third eye?
Well, I think that it makes sense that it is, because it's the only eye that is by itself. Like, it is scientifically proven that we have this pineal gland that looks like an eye inside of our brain, and the other two are kind of in a pair. So I would love to hear what anyone else thinks of that.
Yeah, I enjoy listening. Do you listen to Santos? What's his name?
No.
He has a whole thing. Rob knows who I'm talking about. You know who I'm talking about?
I don't think so.
I don't.
Okay. Oh, yes. There's other references to the pineal gland in where Jacob wrestles with God. Is it pineal?
Pineal. Yeah. Yeah. Rob, what are your thoughts on that whole thing there?
I mean, we have a pineal gland. It is, apparently light sensitive, and there's no light in our brains to sense, right? It's deep inside our brains, so it's something.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
something.
sending.
And I mean, the pineal gland is shaped like a pine cone, and they say it can open up or not, and it gets calcified with fluoride, and
Another meaning too could be like the collapsing of dualistic perception, of like seeing things like as separated.
That's very interesting. When thine eye is single, the whole body is full of light, but when thine eye is evil, thy body is also full of darkness.
Well, what does it mean for the body to be full of light? Like, does that mean?
I would think the divine spark.
And I guess does that mean we're more likely to not suffer bodily degradation? Does that
Maybe Maybe.
Does that mean we're less likely to be led into temptation? The more light we have within our body, the more control we have over this animalistic part of ourselves. If it could it ever be fully actualized and we become these like light beings, these transfigured bodies that are talked about at certain
Yeah.
places?
Well, and then
Does
Christ
that
says he is the light.
right? Because that's the thing. When we're talking about the millennial reign, they supposedly have different bodies there. And yeah.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
what
like
about
that
the
gets, yeah, go on.
No,
Go ahead.
I'd like you to go. I
Well,
was just gonna say I
I
don't
was
want
gonna say it gets into the ideas of Palace of Versailles being built without bathrooms, right? Like the maybe people with perfected bodies lived there, and
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
I sent you the Santos stuff on the pineal gland. He was riffing on this whole thing about Pinocchio and the pineal gland. So
Yep, that makes sense. I don't know him, but I'm
yeah,
familiar with.
I sent it
that
to you guys on
concept.
Instagram, so you can check it out.
Thank you.
Okay, let's keep going, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Take heed, therefore, that the light which is in thee be not darkness. If thy whole body therefore be full of light, having no part dark, the whole shall be full of light, as when the bright shining of a candle doth give thee light. And as he spake, a certain Pharisee besought him to dine with him, and he went in and sat down to meat. And when the Pharisee saw it, he marveled that he had not first washed before dinner. And the Lord said unto him, Now do ye Pharisees make clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but your inward part is full of ravening and wickedness. So largely that it's all for show. There's no, as Jordan's been talking about through this entire session, there's no internal change. And we see Jesus really pointing that out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's in keeping with the general theme of that adherence to ritual is not what matters so much, right?
Yeah. Ye fools, did not he that made that which is without make that which is within also? So they clean the outside, but they're not cleaning the inside. They're not cleaning up the inside. Hence, as we've talked about, the repossession of demonic spirits. But rather give alms of such things as ye have, and behold, all things are clean unto you. But woe unto you, Pharisees, for ye tithe mint and rue and all manner of herbs, and pass over judgment and the love of God. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. Woe unto you, Pharisees, for ye love the uppermost seats in the synagogues and greetings in the markets. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye are as graves which appear not, and the men that walk over them are not aware of them. Then answered one of the lawyers. So we have the lawyers again. We don't like them. And said unto him, Master, thus saying thou reproachest us also. And he said, Woe unto you also, ye lawyers, for ye laid men with burdens grievous to be borne, and ye yourselves touch not the burdens with one of your fingers. So they're just piling on law and legalism and really burdening them down. Woe unto you, for ye build the sepulchres of the prophets, and your fathers killed them. So they might have this money and these resources to build these tributes to the prophets of old. But at the same time, Jesus is saying, cool, but you're totally rejecting John. You're rejecting me. Really, you guys are just upholding the status quo. If you would have been the individuals that persecuted the prophets back then, because really you're just interested in in keeping with these superficial laws, and you would have found fault with them as well. And if anything, these monuments that you're building are glorification of what your fathers did to God's holy people.
And we get into that later with Zechariah and Abel.
Yep. Truly ye bear witness that ye allow the deeds of your fathers, for they indeed killed them, and ye build their sepulchres. Therefore also said the wisdom of God. Some people think this is Jesus, the wisdom of God. That's another way of referring to him. I will send them prophets and apostles, and some of them they shall slay and persecute, that the blood of all the prophets, which was shed from the foundation of the world, may be required of this generation. So I was like, I got stuck on this for a while. Like, what is the blood of the prophets going to be required of this generation, I ultimately decided that this is about payback. And generally it's believed on the consensus historical view is that that the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, and that this was to exact revenge for the slaying of all these different prophets. I think I'm just going to close this out, and then we'll talk about it all, if that's okay with you guys. From the blood of Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, which perished between the altar and the temple, verily I say unto you, it shall be required of this generation. What I thought was interesting about this is that Abel, if you kind of infer here, Abel is referred to as the first prophet, which is a really interesting idea. Given that he doesn't really say anything or offer any prophetic utterances, but he does make a pleasing sacrifice of lamb to God. And this sort of prefigures the sacrificial lamb that is Christ. So in a sense, you could argue that it's prophetic. And again, being required, I think this might be, it sounds like a threat, and the temple fulfilled this, maybe, the temple being destroyed. Woe unto you, lawyers, for ye have taken away the key of knowledge. Ye entered not in yourselves, and them that were entering in ye hindered. So they obfuscated. They made it impossible for people to have true knowledge of the Messiah with all the legalism. And as he said these things unto them, the scribes and the Pharisees began to urge him vehemently and to provoke him to speak of many things, laying wait for him and seeking to catch something out of his mouth, that they might accuse him. So that's the end of the chapter, but I kind of went through the last 10 or 15 verses pretty quick there. So I'm going to open it up to everybody else. I think Jordan was telling me something earlier about the role of lawyers. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Well, separately, there's a book called Woe Unto Lawyers, and I didn't understand it was a biblical reference until I read this. And then that was interesting. It's a really fun book. I accessed it through the House of Marcus, their law library. It was a pretty easy read, but a lot of it was just about kind of the trickery or the the sentiment here being we've created, or the law class has created, this really convoluted, difficult scenario to navigate. He talks about like it being underground, like a grave, and people totally not knowing walk over it and are entrapped by it. I don't know that I had like super deep analysis of it, but it just felt as relevant today as whenever it was written here.
Mm-hmm.
And then also this aspect of when you partner with a lawyer, like they're not taking responsibility, right? The individual is still responsible whether or not that individual is fully aware of the whole game that they're operating in.
I think they rarely are aware of. And back in 46, Jesus says, in my translation, and you experts in the law, woe to you, because you load people down with burdens they can hardly carry.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's intense.
Yeah.
That's so intense.
And you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them. So that just adds. But does anybody mind if we go back to the lamp for a minute?
Go for it. Go for it.
No one lights a lamp and puts it in a place where it will be hidden or under a bowl. So, and my perception of that is sort of by the way of spiritual gifts, because when you have spiritual gifts, you can't hide them, or you can't stay, like you have to share them and you have to use them and you have to put them out there, because they're not just for you, they're for the benefit of other people as well. And that was just in my mind, and I wanted to throw that out there.
I think that's a great point. And even thinking about a bowl over it, like a light would go out.
Yep.
Because there's no oxygen.
It would definitely, it would extinguish it.
Yeah. So the more you use your spiritual gifts, the more they grow. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's true for me. I
Yeah, I
feel
think
like a lot of good things have happened when I stopped hiding my spiritual gifts.
absolutely.
Yeah, I
you
mean
kind of don't realize.
that obviously relates as well to Christ telling people not to tell them about his works, right? Like, did he really mean that?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's is Christ hiding by doing that? Is Christ hiding his light? I
I think he's acknowledging here that no one's really gonna not tell.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe so.
It'd be very hard to keep that a secret if it had
Yeah.
happened to you.
Hmm. For sure. Rob, what say you? Do you want to close with anything here?
I don't know. I don't know that I have anything in particular at the end here. You know, the uh, e- oops. Let me see. Let me see what I had here.
I had one thing, and it might be related, but we can ignore it too while Rob is looking. Something I didn't mention is that Jesus talks about, oh, there's going to be, retribution for how you've memorialized the slaying of the prophets, and really you're no better than your fathers who did this. It seems like there's like collective guilt. Like even though those generations from the past with the prophets that he sent into them were slain, it seems like he's also going to hold that current generation accountable for this. And I thought that was kind of an interesting idea that the guilt was being
Yeah, I mean,
transferred down.
he is definitely saying that they're gonna they've not repudiated it, and therefore they're gonna bear the collective responsibility. Yeah, for
But
sure.
if they had, I think if they had, then they would have been spared.
Yeah.
I I think, but it seems like they're pretty dug in.
Yeah, I mean, he's criticizing them for defending us their legal sinecures, really,
Hmm.
right? He's
Yep.
saying
And perhaps
you know
benefiting.
Yeah.
what?
And benefiting.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's
They're the
why they're doing it.
beneficiaries of these wicked acts.
Yeah, that's right.
Tisk tisk.
Well, that raises an interesting that raises an interesting question for ourselves too, right? Like it's
Yeah, sure.
like how responsible are we for the things that our ancestors may have done? Like I don't really know what I mean. It's not my ancestors come from like illiterate hill people, so I don't know what they did. Probably, but yeah, am I supposed to do something? Much just
Well, I mean, this is talking about they clearly are aware, they're celebrating it. They're like continuing this tradition of that, which might be different than being ignorant of what your ancestral line has done.
Right. In my translation, it says, so you testify that you approve of what your forefathers did. So, I mean, if you're not aware and you don't testify and you don't approve, then I don't see how we could be held too accountable. I
But
hope.
I think, yeah, certainly. I think another question I would ask myself is where in my current reality are things happening that I don't internally approve of, but that I'm being complicit with or allowing myself to benefit from, silently or otherwise. I think that's, yeah.
oh.
Being a human is complicated.
It's so easy.
It makes me wonder about things like, taking all, we're living in land that was stolen, right?
There's that.
Well, this gets into the timeline, but I'm not touching this stuff. I've already put my foot in my mouth a million times on this. No, I'm not going to go full schizo on that. So,
Well, yeah. I do
I
have
mean,
questions
that's
about
that's
history.
what they say on the timeline. That's what they say. So
As far as, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know that I believe all of history, but going back 150, 200 years. I mean, 150 years ago, there were still
okay,
Indians we were taking land from, right? I mean, even though my ancestors only came here in the 1920s or about 100 years ago, you know.
Yeah. Rob, you're hedging your bets because if you don't endorse it.
Right. There you go.
Just teasing.
But at the same time, how can we, right the wrongs of what our ancestors did? Like we can't just leave and go back to, our home original ancestor country. Like
Yeah.
right. Well,
it's
then you'd go like I'm from European descent, I guess. I don't. It's not like there's like great family records on this, but then what happened in that situation, and then where do I go from there? Like how far?
right.
Well, what if you're mixed?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What if there's like two sides? You're trying to figure out where's your allegiance.
Yeah, I think about
Yeah,
my
I mean,
own
my
family.
kids have ancestry that goes back to the Revolutionary War. So
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, I mean, I just know what my family has shared with me, but in my family, there's Cherokees. So, but like, they married, but like that side was never allowed anywhere, right? Like they couldn't come to the white part of the family's homes, like they weren't allowed there. Like it's interesting.
So, well, look, I think this is our longest one yet. We're going to clock in at close to an
Yeah, I
hour
think we're out
40.
of stamina.
I thought it was good.
It was great.
I thought it was good.
It was
Yeah.
great.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
I did not expect it to be as long as it was. I thought, we'd
it's a
clock
little
in.
longer chapter. I mean, this is 50
That's true.
verses. Like the last
Yep.
one was 30 something.
All right. Well, why don't we
40.
stop recording
Okay.
and everybody knows the drill. See you
Yep.
next week, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.